So let's go over the homework. So I asked you guys to add sound effects and music, as well as add a score display at the top of the screen. The score display also required you to keep track of score, which was part of the work. So let's go over the sound effects and music to Pong. I gave out a version of Pong kind of as a starter, so this is what I gave everyone last week. The paddles didn't move, but the ball was going around and bouncing on either side. Yeah. So let's first make it so that this version of Pong actually moves and works properly. This is kind of a review since I already went over this in class a couple weeks ago, but I'm just going to do it again because it's rather quick. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I can move both paddles. I'm going to use up and down. And if you watch, a lot of times when I work, that I like to find, if I know that I'm going to be doing the same thing over and over again, I'll try to reuse as much code as I can. So in this case here, I know that I'm going to be doing this paddle movement for the right and left paddles, but I'm going to do it once, and then I'm going to figure out a way to make it so that I can just modify just a little bit and reuse as much as possible, save myself kind of some typing. So I know that this works. I'm going to just run it once real quick to make sure this piece works so that I don't copy something that doesn't work. So I hit up, and you can see my paddle is moving, which is great. It's moving a little slowly, so I'm just going to bump it up a little bit. I'll do 256. So yeah, 256 is special because the screen is 512, which means you can cover the screen in 2 seconds. So I'm going to take this whole thing. So I'm going to take this entire if statement, and I'm going to just copy it 3 times. And I'm going to change each of the keys, and I'm going to change what paddle is using here. So it's going to be the left paddle, like this, and making sure I change the direction here. And with that, I have both paddles moving up and down, and I only had to change a minimal set of things, so now I can move both paddles up and down. Oh, I didn't mean to do A. This is S. Okay, so now that I have the paddles moving up and down, I know I have collision code written here for the left paddle for when I mouse over it. Like so. I'm not going to touch the collision code right now. What I kind of want to do is do the sound effects while the ball's bouncing around. And I mentioned in the homework that there's this link to this website, BFXR, which is great for generating audio. Oh, that's right. I'm going to use Chrome for this. So there's all these preset like generators that you can use. I think this is the one I want to use here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm gonna create 2 of these, one for hitting the wall and one for hitting the paddle. I'm gonna call this ball hit wall. I'm gonna create a mutation on it. Okay. And that's gonna be ball hit paddle. Okay. So I'm going to move these guys into my content folder. I have an audio folder here which had a song and the jump sound in it. So I'm going to take these ball hit sounds. I'm going to put them back into here. So these are 2 sounds I want to use. Let's do the ball hitting the wall first. And the first thing I want to do is I need to include the audio header file. And now that I have that, I'm going to load the sound buffer for the sound. Every sound that you want to play has to be loaded from the file that lives on disk into memory. So in order to do that, you have this thing called sound buffer. And I'm going to name each of my variables for which sound buffer it's related to. I'm going to say wall SFX. Okay. And then I'm just going to call load from file. This is very similar to textures, remember. And I'm going to pass in the path, which is going to be audio, and then that's the name of my file. Notice that I actually just copied it from here. I actually hit F2, and I selected the whole file name just so I don't type it incorrectly. And that way I don't have to actually type it out either. I just do this, and I hit Control-C to copy it, and then I can paste it right in here. Okay. And I'm going to do include my IO stream. Okay. So if I fail to load it, I'm going to have an error. So I'm going to say fail to load wall SFX file. And then now that I have my wall sound effect, I can actually play that sound whenever I want to. So you have two ways that you can declare this. One, you can declare a sound here outside of your while loop, which means it'll get declared once and only once. This is actually probably preferred because you don't really want to be doing this work unless you actually have to. That being said, if you declare this inside the loop, anywhere inside the loop, what this will mean is that you'll be declaring the sound and setting the buffer every single frame, which is still fine. It works okay since it's just Pong. But typically what you want to do is you want to declare all your resources up front so that whenever you have something that you're loading off disk and whether you're doing work, you want to reduce the amount of work that you do to bare minimum, right? You don't want to be doing unnecessary work. The reason why is that the more unnecessary work you do, the more time you spend doing that unnecessary work, the lower your frame rate is going to be in your game. Because your computer has to spend more time doing that unnecessary work and less time thinking about how to make that game run. So a good example again is Overwatch. We don't want to do any unnecessary work because we want to make sure the game is shipping and workable on all platforms and as many computers as possible, as low as specs as possible. So you want to try to remember that if you can avoid doing any work at all more often than you need, then go ahead and do it. Like so in this case here, I'm going to declare the sound outside the while loop, which means it'll get declared one time here and never again. Now what I can do is I can go to the place where the ball is hitting the wall. So this right here I know is where the ball is hitting the wall on all sides. So I'm going to just put a wall sound.play here. I'm going to put another one right here when it hits the bottom wall. And for now, I have it bouncing off the left and right wall. I'll put it in there too. I'm going to delete this right after I test it, but I just want to play it. I don't know how many of you guys run into this at home, but if you remember from class, if you want to fix this, it says it's missing a DLL file. And DLL files are just basically like a library file. It's kind of like a header file that's loaded while the game is running. DLL files are loaded to provide the game with additional functionality that it needs. So in this case here, it needs an OpenAL audio DLL, which means that it needs to play a file, play a music file or a sound file. So you need to grab the DLL file from this bin directory here, which is an SFML 2.32 bin. Then you go to the executable place and you paste your DLL right there. So for the final projects, anything that you guys are going to hand in this time is going to be the source code plus your executable and any content and DLLs that you need. All right? So keep that in mind that you will probably have to do this if you have sounds of any kind. Here's my sound. You can hear it bouncing off the walls, which is great. So I'm going to delete the ones where it bounces off the left and right wall. I'm going to delete the if statements there because I actually want this thing to go off the right and left edge. Right. Okay. Did you guys hear it bounce again? Because it actually bounced off the bottom wall off the right edge. That's okay. We're going to fix that too. So let's play the sound so when it hits the paddle too. It's also pretty self-explanatory. Like for when it hits the paddle, we just want another sound buffer for the paddle sound effects. And I'm going to make sure that I copied and pasted that whole thing and replaced the things that I needed to. And I know that this thing is called paddle, but I'm just going to double check. And copy that guy. And that way I can just replace that whole thing, just in case. And I'm going to declare another paddle sound effect here. I'm sorry, another sound effect. Making sure to replace the things that you need. You notice what I'm doing though when I do this kind of thing? I only replace what I absolutely need to, so I only type what I need to. I type paddle once and I notice I don't type anything again. I'm double clicking on words to copy them. I'm basically like borrowing words from here to put them in here. And this habit is just something that I feel like is not only is a time saver because you don't have to type, but also it prevents you from having typos. Like, sure, I could do this and I could type paddle sound every time, and then I could go here, I could type paddle SFX, and sometimes I'll do that, but a lot of times when I'm copying things around, I'll reuse what's already typed because I know that works. And that way it saves me a lot of time and makes you more efficient when you're doing this work. So you notice I only type one thing, which is paddle once. So now I want it so that when I mouse over the paddle, I'm going to play this sound. So let's try that. So it's really, I'm just sprinkling these play sounds everywhere. So now. So you notice it's playing it every time that it actually hits it, which makes sense because my mouse is continually to be inside this if statement. So now that I know that it works, I'm going to make it so that the paddle actually bounces the ball off of it. So instead of this, I don't know if you guys remember from a few weeks ago, we had this like this. This is just the normal collision routine without taking into consideration the radius of the ball. I'm going to also have to do this for the right side. So I'm going to do this, and get rid of this if statement here, copy this whole thing, do the right paddle here. Like so. Get rid of the fill color. And we're going to bounce the ball too. Same for here. So now my paddles will bounce the ball. I'll take into account the radius here in just a second. So you guys could hear this, the paddle sound slightly differently. And it went through the paddle there. It's okay. So we're going to take into account here. I'm just going to add the radius check here, just like what we did in class. And we're going to do this, like so. Okay. All right. So now we have this. Let's get the music going. So music is very similar to sound. However, for music, it'll load it. It'll basically, instead of loading the file into memory, what it actually does is it loads opens the file so it's ready to read, and then loads part of it as it's playing it. And music has its own variable type, which is just called music. I'm going to call this thing overtime music, because that's what it is. And instead of calling load from file, you're going to call open from file. And it's the same exact kind of behavior here. So I'm just going to copy that. Instead of load from file, this is open from file. And we're going to take this song here, which is test song, and we're going to load that. And notice this is an OGG. It doesn't support MP3s. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to play it right when it starts, right when the game starts. Lower the volume a little bit. It immediately feels like more intense. That paddle is not enjoying that. Oh shit, get it. Alright. This is actually a good opportunity to figure out, again, I talked about debugging a little bit last week and trying to figure out, why something like that happens. And sometimes you just want to, put a breakpoint there, and breakpoints are probably my most preferred way to find out why something might not be working correctly. I'll just look here and see, let's see, ball position. I think this is the problem here, and it's because, yes, because the paddle position here is not including the size. I know that because the paddle position is the top left corner, so you need to make sure that when you're teleporting it, it's actually accounting for the size of the paddle too. All right, so once we have that, now let's get to the second part of the homework, which was I want to add score displayed at the top of the screen. So the first thing I would recommend to do is, I know I asked to show you the score at the top. The first thing you need to do, though, is to keep track of the score. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is just to print something out to the screen whenever, I'm sorry, not to the screen, but to the console whenever a score is gained. And so my recommendation is just, hey, I know that score is gained when the ball goes off the right and left edge of the screen, right? So if the shape is less than 0, this means that scored on the left side. And if this thing is greater than 24, then we're going to do this. So as soon as the ball goes off, and this time I'm actually not going to use the radius here because I actually want half the ball to go off the edge of the screen. So I know here that I scored. I'm going to just print out to the screen. I'm going to say player 2 scored. And I'm not even going to use any variables or anything yet. I just want to like capture when each player scores. So I'm going to watch the console here on the left side. I'm going to let that ball go out. Okay, I see that. That's cool. Notice it happened all the time. Like there was a lot of spam that was happening. I'm going to bounce it off the right paddle here. Cool. So I've just verified that these two cout statements will get run whenever it goes off the right and left edge of the screen. So what I want to do here is there's two things I want to do. One, I want to reset the ball back to the beginning. And I showed you guys how to do that too. But I'm just going to do that again. So I'm going to do 512 by 256. That's where the ball is going to go. It's going to reset when it goes back. And I'm going to set the velocity to 0 in both cases. By doing this, the ball goes to the middle and it stops there, right? There it is. And now this thing prints out one time only. Okay, so now that I know that it prints out one time only, what I want to do is now keep track of the score. So I'm going to go up to the very top here. I have a bunch of variables that I want to use. I'm going to actually declare another variable right around here. I'm going to declare 2. I'm going to call it player 1 score. Give it 0. I'm making an integer. And player 2 score. Make that also an integer. And these both start at 0. And all you really have to do is, when player 2 scores, give him a point. And when player 1 scores, give them a point. And instead of just printing out player 1 scored, I'm going to print out player 1 score. And I'm going to print out their actual score here. Copy this entire line. Change this from 1 to 2. All right. So now I should see it'll say 0 or 1. It should say 1 or player 1 scored. Now he has 1 point here. All right, and let's get it so that when I move the paddle, it actually moves the ball again. So here's where I'm moving the paddle. I'm making a Boolean here to figure out whether I've moved the paddle at all. And the reason is that I want to have an if statement right after this. If paddle moved, I'm going to say, hey, if the paddle moved and the velocity.x is equal to 0 and velocity.y is equal to 0, then what I want to do is I want to move the ball again. So I'm going to take my my ball. It had a velocity of this to start, 200, negative 150. Put it down here so that if you move the paddle at all, if either player move and the ball is currently not moving, then go ahead and start moving the ball. So I'm going to score a point, and I'm going to let the player 1 score another point. we go. 2, 3. I'm going to let player 2 score a point now. You can see here now it's keeping track of the score correctly. So now that I know that these two variables that I created have the score, all I have to do is draw them to the screen. And we're going to load a font for this. So in order to draw things to the screen, you need to have a font as well as text. It's, again, very similar to sounds and to texture. So I'm going to create what's called a font. I'm going to call it my font. And we're going to take the same exact behavior here for a sound effect, and we're going to do it for the font instead. And I know that this thing lives inside my fonts folder. Copy this whole name and go into fonts, like so. Okay, now I have my font. So what I need is something called a text object. And I actually need 2 text objects, one for the player 1 score and one for the player 2 score. So I'm going to create them again. I'm going to create them here. However, I'm going to be updating them every frame. I'm going to call this one player 1 score text. I'm going to create another one as player 2 score text. And for player 1 and player 2, we're going to set the font with the my font. And same thing for player 2. All right. So these two are set up with my font now. And I just want to draw them wherever. I kind of want to just see if this works, because a lot of times before I even get to working on it, I just want to verify that the font loaded correctly, that my text is visible. So I'm just going to draw these things at the top of the screen. I'm just going to put some test text here. So set string, and just put testing. And I'm going to put another one that's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right. And anytime that you have text and you want to draw it, you have to go down to the bottom here. You have to add it down here to be drawn. And by the way, next class, we're going to be learning how to do this in a way that doesn't require you to update this every single time you add something new. So right now we're doing this because it's much more simple, but that's actually not the way that you want to be handling all your game objects for drawing. Otherwise, this list will get very big very quickly otherwise. All right, so now I have player 1 text and player 2 text. I just want to see text in the top left corner of the screen. Cool. That's a mix of testing and A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So now that I see this, what I'm going to do is I want to set this thing up so that I can put the score in. So it's actually, this is what we learned last week, which is if you want to print out a number to that screen, you actually have to use something new. There's something called an SStream header. And this thing is a string header. And this is what we're going to be using to take numbers and convert them into letters, essentially. Because C++ will not do that for you automatically, unfortunately. So I'm going to keep all this here. And right about here where the ball is doing the collision behavior, this is where I'm going to do my logic for converting it. So there's something called an OStream. I'm going to call it OS. And well, all you have to do is if you pump in just a number into there, this thing now has the ability to convert it back to you as a string, which is nice because now I can just take my player 1 score text and set the string to os.str. And I've just shoved this thing into here. And you can shove anything into here, like you can shove like player 1 like that, and it'll also get put into the string. You're going to need one of these for each of the strings that you want to use. So I'm going to just call this OS player 1. Like so. And create one for OS player 2. Like so. And let's just draw this. They should both be, player 1 and player 2 should be drawing in the top left corner with 0. And if you want to move it, all you have to do is just specify the position, because these things are just objects that you can draw. So I'm going to take my player 1 score text. I'm going to set the position. Let's set it to be like 256. 256 and 0, which is fine. And I'm going to set the next one to be, I don't know, 512. So now if I let the score happen, so player 2 has score now. And remember, if you want to, you can also set the origin of the text to be right in the middle, too. So right now I'm setting the position here. If you want it to be exactly in the middle, like equidistant, there's a way you can do that, too. For text. All you have to do is set the origin here. I'm going to set these both to be player 1, 0, player 2, 0. That's the string. That's the size of the string that will always be shown. So it'll be this word plus this number. And if you want to, you can get global bounds width. And divide this by 2. Let's see here. Get global bounds. Expression proceeding parentheses or parent comments that point to function type. Looks like here I am missing. There's not functions. If you do this, what you can do is you can take the direct middle of the screen, which is 512, minus some amount, so maybe minus 150, and then take this and plus it 150. And that way, both strings will be 150 pixels away from the middle of the screen. It doesn't look any different, but they're both exactly the same distance away from the middle. All right. Okay, so that's it. That's the homework. It required you to keep track of score and format strings to draw them at the top, and then play a bunch of sound effects and music based on Pong. All right. Well, there's a lot of stuff in really quickly, but it's okay that if it doesn't work exactly the same way or you did it differently, that's okay. So everyone can do it in a different way. All right, questions?
How did you get the 0 to stay here? On mine, the 0 won't appear.
Oh, the 0 won't appear at the top of the score, you mean?
Yeah, like I see a player 1 and then it has 0. Mine
Yeah.
won't show 0. It just goes. It just is blank until you score, and then it goes to 1.
Are you? You probably. So watch where I'm doing this code right here. You see where I'm formatting the OS stream? This right here is actually happening every frame. You need to make sure that you're doing this every frame, otherwise it won't be pumping the score into it. My guess is that you're only doing that. If you do this like up here, like when you score, like this, it'll only do it the first time. So you might be doing it like, let's just do it like this. So see how it says nothing there until I watch when I score. See how it pops up?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, it's because your behavior needs to be outside of this if statement. Because this if statement we showed only prints it out when you score, which means this code right here only gets run one time when you score. But you need to be formatting this every single frame. Otherwise, yeah, you get that behavior. Okay. All right. Okay, let me break this.